everybody to this Curiosita, and it is wonderful to have you all here. As Prof. Klopper said, my name is Marla Koonin, and I am the Executive for Strategy and Stakeholder Management here at the Vinci Institute, and it is indeed my honor to be your MC. So Curiosity follows one of the important values of Da Vinci, Curiosita, which is curiosity. Curiosita obviously coming from the Da Vinci principles after whom we are named. But for us, this piquing our curiosity and playing around with curiosity is really a critical part of who we are. And so at the start of every Curiosita, before we introduce our dynamic and inspirational student speaker and guest speaker, what we do is we try to pique your curiosity with a little bit of a debate. So today when Prof. Klopper and myself were deciding this week what we wanted to discuss, we really try to look at topical issues. So we don't want to discuss always, philosophical things. But one of the things that's been covered quite a lot in the press at the moment is around the fact that South Africans are not yet quite ready for the death of the office. So you hear many people who say, I love working from home and it's fantastic, but there's quite a few pertinent issues to the debate. So I'm just going to throw out some concepts and thoughts. There was an article running in the Business Day today about this, so I'm just extracting a couple of thoughts from there and a couple of my own thoughts. And then I'm going to open the floor, as we always do, and really would appreciate your input. For transparency, Da Vinci has gone fully online, and so we mostly do work from home now, having been a very office-based culture. And so we've certainly had a couple of these experiences ourselves. So I think the argument that most of us will work from home permanently is certainly doing the rounds, and that is what the future looks like, and that it's going to be much more unstructured, and you're going to see a lot of business properties turned into residential properties, etc. And I mean, there's all this talk globally, but very much in South Africa. But I think this concept of working at a desk and being in a building with other people is a little bit less over than many of us actually think it is. So I think that we've got to take into consideration some things, like not everyone is comfortable working from home. We live in a country where people do not always have the resources, the connectivity, and the type of conducive environment to being able to work. And as I say this, my dog is yapping in the background. And that is
working from home.
Yes, and that is part of the issue. So, further, some young people are also very desperate to access management for guidelines. And mentorship, as many of us have seen online, it doesn't have that same personal touch as day-to-day mentoring. That's why at Da Vinci, for example, we insist on going into the office once a week in teams so that we can facilitate and have these kind of group discussions. And then I think what a lot of people have taken the economic stuff into account of transportation, but they haven't taken into account the setup costs and all those aspects of a home office and what that would actually take. And then lastly, the point I wanted to make is this focus on quality work. What is the work output from home? How do we monitor it, etc.? And then obviously not forgetting the networked opportunities and the opportunities for networking. Some of the research that's actually been conducted have shown that many people actually want to get back to work. And for some people, for example, the hours have become quite untenable because a lot of organizations run meetings in the day and in the evenings, and there are far less boundaries put in place because the feeling is, well, you're home, so you can do it. And then obviously on the more positive side, there's all aspects associated with different lifestyle balances, people being closer to home, places where their children go to school, etc. So I think with those thoughts in mind, and considering that many people said that they wanted to go back to the office, and then the third wave hit and we were pushed back into home, I would like to pose a challenge and ask you, do you think South Africa is ready for a work from home culture? Do you think quality is produced at home? How do you think we can lead and manage and ensure mentorship and guidance? And what do we do about the socioeconomic issues that our workforce face with regards to this? So I'm opening the floor. You're welcome to raise your hand or just unmute your mic. And I would love to hear from all of you.
Good afternoon.
what I hear what Marl is saying, and it's certainly wonderfully comfortable when you do work from home, and you can, if you're an early riser like I am, if I want to get up at 3:30 and go in and keep the sort of connectivity off and do everything offline, and then at a decent hour send it off, it's productive time. But there's a lot of research now coming out that is showing the following issues are being raised. One of the key issues in this Women's Month is that many women who are working from home do not get sufficiently away from their abuser. They might, and that is becoming a very negative thing. So they're constantly in the home and also in the sight and in the proximity of an abuser. And similarly, children in the very hard lockdown and in the online learning time when schools closed and children were learning from home, many of those children suffered abuse they were sort of freer of it when they would actually go into a classroom, and there might have been those opportunities then to talk to somebody. So those are at the very, very serious end. We've also seen that in certain industries, the productivity has dropped. The service industry and financial services industry, in many instances, the actual service orientation towards people and productivity is not as high as it could have been. So those are some of the negatives. But yes, the positives certainly are there. I just don't think we are ready for it. Our data costs are still too high. There's still too big a divide between those that have and those that do not have. And also, I think it could have a negative effect on those who want to seek a job. And we heard today 11.7 million people do not have a job. So there's positive, but there are negatives, and we'll have to work very hard to overcome the negatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lloyd. Somebody just WhatsApped me, and I don't want to put the colleague on the spot, but this is how one of the big financial institutions' head office look. And when I look at the picture, you can see it's open plan, and I see a lot of empty desks, or let's call it hot desks, but there's no people. So, and if you go back to work, do you find yourself lonely? And Shirley, I think on the one side you make the case for productivity, but if you're alone at work, you can't be productive. So, any thoughts on that? The people from industry. There's a lot of you here from APSA, FNB, from DSI, from Standard Bank.
I think there is just a weird feeling as you walk into the head office environment. The head office structure, for example, it's so beautiful. It's enticing. It gives you life as you walk in. But at some stage, I never thought that as you walk in, you will literally even feel scared. Because as you go up through the escalators, you find that you are the only person that is actually walking up, and you're like, what the hell is going on in this building? Then to add on to the previous speaker, I read an article that was actually acknowledging that 23,000 teenagers in South Africa and in Gauteng alone has fallen pregnant. So in relation to what you're saying from working from home, when you talk around women working from home being closer to the abusers, I found it very interesting to realize that the children has actually redirected their energy. Instead of being at school full time, they are at school selective days. And in those selective days, then the other days when they're not attending, then they refocusing and re-looking at the activities. And sadly, one of the activity that has come out strong as per Media 24 and the results that has been outlined is high rate of pregnancy. That means there is a different spot that the kids have identified. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Regina. Herbert, do you want to add to that comment or reflection?
Yes, I'm just going to touch few Dr. Shirley's ones, and Prof K. The name is reflecting as Prof K from my side. There's two things. This is just something that I've been observing. It's undocumented observation, though. In terms of the lifestyle changing when you're working from home, yes, definitely. But we're seeing a couple of things rising from those environments from working from home. It's like now you in a way you don't become, you work, but you're not an employee anymore. You become dad or mom that's home, and you find yourself that a lot of things now, you spend more time trying to balance the two, which then introduces the element of working until late. So now your working hours, they become longer, and there's no stop. You don't know when to stop. It's like now when you're working from home, you do more work than you're in the office, but you find that there's too much stop and attend to kids, stop and attend to whatever that may arises in the house. And going into what Prof said about abuse, we're starting to see an increase, especially when you look at those that are reported, that there's now we're starting to see these things. And I don't only think it's because of working from home. It's now like because we're now starting to spend more time in the house, and you're expected to do certain things, and they start introducing other elements, which will then boil down to being abused, or there's too much conflict in the house. So those things, it's a challenge. But now as companies from where we're sitting now, we're carrying a lot of costs. You still find people taking more days when they're home, your leaves, and they're starting to impact the company operational costs and finances and the data cost. We were not ready for this. We are not prepared for this. And your wear and tear on your hardware, that now starting to spike. And your people management also, it's not easy to manage your resources. I mean, there's team diversities that are not easy to control now, because there's people that just disappear and they tell you there's load shedding and other factors. But generally, as industry-wise, I don't think we're ready. We're feeling the pain now. Our costs. I think in the next coming 6 months, if this doesn't change, we're going to find ourselves in a state where we need to let more people go. And that's what's scaring me. I mean, we're already struggling with employment in the country, and unfortunately, we might be faced with that. So, yeah, it's a challenging environment. Right?
I think those are exceptionally valid points, because I do definitely think that whole role sort of merging, and that is really quite a tough balance to actually sort of weigh up as well. And I think a lot of people are feeling also with the perpetual lockdowns, this continual trapped in feeling and very little escapism when it comes to things like work, which is often a space where people can socialize, where they can, have different interpersonal interactions and relations. And I think that definitely plays a role as well. And then I saw, Prof, you had your hand up as well, Prof Setswe.
Yes, I just wanted to make 2 points. Firstly, to answer your question, is South Africa ready for the working from home culture? I will say no first. I work in Parktown, but I work from home in Centurion. And so on an odd day in which I go to the office, I find that the traffic levels between Pretoria and Joburg on N1 are so high that there are a lot of people who still believe in going out to the office, and Gautrain is still full. So it says something about people who still prefer to go to the office. And the struggle to balance between work, family, and social life that was indicated earlier on. Maybe one of the reasons that says that, we may not be ready. We're struggling very hard to balance between that. And the third issue is the issue of team diversity. What I would call organizational culture and values, are compromised. You are no longer having teams together. Everybody's in their own home. You don't know how people are handling the issue of technology with meetings, whether everyone is attentive or they are busy, multitasking, doing 10,000 other things at the back when they're supposed to be attending to a meeting full time. But on the positive side is that the online meetings are working very well. Technology has allowed us to have technology helping us to work, at different and odd hours, and you can handle so many meetings and so many workshops and such kind of things. In a research institute where I work, the research output in the past year has increased by 65%. Simply because people have always wanted to work from home, and we were stopping them. They said the office was disturbing them. And so, this research output, and already this year, I have seen that we are actually performing 80% better than even last year on research output. On an odd day in which I go to the office, the offices are completely empty. There's no one in the organization where I work in Parktown. So it says that people are getting ready to work from home, and so we have to make new plans around the rent and all sorts of things that are related to the costs of running an office. Thank you.
Thanks, Prof. I think those are extremely valuable points. We're going to move on soon to the student speakers. So I see that there's one person who still has their hand raised, but I'm not sure if yours is from earlier, but Tota, I see yours is raised.
Yes, thanks, Dr. Mala. Yeah, my name is Toto Matsidiso. Yes, I just have a bit of a reflection in terms of working from home, and one of my executives always will joke about some people are perceiving this as that they are home but they can work, which will obviously let production down. But it's one way, it's the other way around. I mean, I was one of the people who were very excited that we'll work from home, because I've been preaching of working from home even before COVID, thinking that one will be able to balance work, say I can work up to this time and study up to this time. But I found a very different picture, in the sense that there is more work when you're home than you don't even have your own time, your own space, regardless of how far you planned. And I'll give one example. My work involves a lot of travel, workshops outside home. So a typical example would be, if I'm supposed to be in Cape Town for 3 days, then I'll go. The 3 days meetings in Pretoria, it means I will not attend. And I'll be in Cape Town, I'll just get feedback. And so now I can't go to Cape Town because the meeting in Cape Town is online. The meetings around or events around Pretoria do not get cancelled. So you find yourself at some point having to be in 2 meetings or attending to this meeting, and when you realize that this is not very interesting, or you can hop into the other meeting, you do that. So one never get time to rest. But also it gave one time to reflect on other issues, your personalities, what you can do best, what you can't do, what are you good at, but also to have time for new hobbies if people have time for that. And the last point also, like Prof has said, working from home has also been very effective. I mean, the department that I work from, Department of Science and Innovation, I think even from our program, we work better from home, because most of our work is international, so we don't see, we're not a cold face service delivery department. But when you look into workshops, like today I've been in a workshop, I actually just finished now at 3:30. The effectiveness of online workshops, you get grouped into what they call workshop rooms. You finish at 10:30 from a workshop room, already on your screen, you'll get a pop-out message, leave the meeting room. You go into the other meeting room immediately. But think of it when we are in a hotel setup or so, we'll move from the room, stop by, go to the loo, get coffee and all that. You lose like a good 5-10 minutes. So that's the effectiveness now of online meetings or working from home. But all in all, it has changed the way we work. It has changed the setup or even the system. When you go to the office, it's lonely, it's empty. For me, going to the office, it's like a waste of time.
Thanks.
I'll pause here.
Yes, I think you've made some extremely valid points, and I do want to close on your comment. I think that it's this whole dance, and it's it's prophetic that you are from in terms of DSI, but it's the reality connected to this dance in the fifth industrial revolution between humanity and technology. So we've got to do have them both. And Brian, it connects to your comment speaking about that. The big change is the end of geography, that you have virtual meetings with people in Cape Town and Joburg as easily as overseas. And I think that thank you for igniting the debate. And I would love it if some of you could contribute blogs to me. You're welcome to email me directly at marla@davinci.ac.za or communications@davinci on this topic or any other topics of debate. I would really greatly appreciate it because I love these discussions and getting into them. I'm not sure if you can see my shared screen, but I just wanted to show you that at Curiosita, what we do is we have a graphicist who basically depicts today. And so to our two guest speakers, we will obviously send it to you. Unfortunately, she couldn't be live with us today. So I am going to send her the recordings, and then she will generate an image of what we discussed today, connected to just a little bit of a memento for you to take home with you. So I just shared my screen to show you an idea because, as I said, Lita isn't here. And now we're going into the main part of the program. And so we've got two speakers lined up, and they are both dynamic and incredible speakers. One you have briefly heard from, and that is Prof. Setswe, who we are indeed honored to have. Our student speaker, just as a reminder, is a speaker who is currently busy with their doctoral degree, and they're in a stage where they would still really appreciate feedback from people. And so they present their topic. And so for those of you in the audience, please feel free to either ask questions to the student candidate or to probe them a little bit, or to actually ask for clarification, or to guide them. With those of you, there's many of you with expertise. So our guest speaker today, who's our doctoral candidate, needs very little introduction to the Da Vinci family, and that's Mr. Ezra Ndwandwe. And the reason for that is he is an entrepreneur of note. He's one of our Da Vinci associates, but he's also exceptionally well known out there in the world. If you meet him, you will see that he is absolutely one of the most impeccable men I've ever encountered in my whole life. And he's got a voice for radio, which is perhaps why he is had a very successful radio talk show on Metro FM Talk. And he's got a massive listenership around that. But I think for me, Ezra, what I respect most about you is the way that you truly balance this whole concept of being an educator and really giving back in terms of sustainable societies, and the way that you've given through your own connections and through your own doings so many people the opportunity to study. But you yourself are really an entrepreneur of brilliance. So Ezra's worked at management and executive levels before he went into his own space at Unilever, McKinsey & Company, SAB Miller, Reckitt, Ben Kaiser. I can just carry on. And his expertise were around strategy development, where he held executive positions. But whilst he worked for them, Ezra actually completed his Master of Business Leadership, and he started a management consulting firm. And he started bringing in really top draw clients. And this list is extremely impressive. I mean, I know some of his clients are Anglo-American, GlaxoSmithKline, Vodacom, Coke, PRASA, DocX, Department of Education. But what I think is incredible about you, Ezra, is how you choose to give back, and how you choose to find ways to give back, even though you have an exceptionally successful organization. So I think I really enjoy your work as an opinion writer and contributor. And you've often written for places like Business Day, CEO Magazine, and many other imprints. And again, as I said, not many people that have a voice for radio have that, blessed with the genetics that you have been. But I think that the reason that you generate such a huge listenership is just because of the way that you speak and the way that you truly co-create and engage with people. And that is why your curiosity and concern about the state of our unemployed youth is something that really does fascinate me, and the way that you've led to all these aspects around giving opportunities within that space. Today, you're presenting your proposed doctoral title, which is a critical evaluation of SME support programs by the South African government. And it indeed gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Ezra Ndwandwe.
Thank you very much. Appreciated. So the topic that I am researching is really something I'm very passionate about, and something that is very close to my heart, purely because I think that we as a country have not come to understand its importance. We define it in many different ways, and therefore that's the reason why we really do not have a structured approach towards making sure that it happens, and it happens well. So the topic of the research is a critical review of government's programs that are aimed at supporting SMMEs. And why this is important, you would see and hear government talk of all these sorts of interventions that they have for entrepreneurs. But to date, research can show you that South Africa's SMMEs, they fold within 3 to 5 years of formation. And that's what I have been trying to do through this research. So the aim of the study is really just to critically review the effectiveness of the current government support programs for SMMEs in a developing socioeconomic context. And that in itself lends it to a question of how are other developing countries leading the support of entrepreneurs, or SMMEs as it were. And to achieve the aim of the study, the following questions were used as guide. 1, why do South Africa's SMMEs fail in 2 to 3 years of establishment? 2, what support do SMMEs really need to support their own businesses and to sustain them? 3, what government programs are aimed, what government programs aimed at supporting SMMEs exist currently as we know them? 4, are these government support programs structured to assist SMMEs? Are they adequate? And 5, how do other developing economies such as Malaysia, Russia, Mauritius, Italy, and world-developed economies such as the US, how are they supporting SMMEs? You would know that Italy is the 7th growing economy in the world, but Italy doesn't have the mineral resources that we have. So there must be something that the SMMEs there, or government there, is doing to support the entrepreneurship landscape, as it were. The research methodology, the design, and the approach was really, so when we started with the research, my supervisor and I had an engagement about this, and we thought it would be a mixed method approach, both qual and quantitative approaches, to use statistical methods to analyze the data that comes out. But the research has now found itself, it's landed itself into a qualitative more than a quantitative research. And really purely because I think one of the difficulties in this climate and this pandemic is people are so fatigued of research questionnaires and research focus groups and research groups that they are called to come and participate in. And in fact, what they do is they would just toss the email that says a research questionnaire, for whatever reasons. People are more concerned about other things other than contributing towards a research piece, as it were. But what we've found out from literature, from desktop research, from literature research, from engaging with the Ministry of the Department of Small Businesses, with the officials at a senior level, is so rich that it really gives us enough to work with in terms of the qualitative approach of the study itself. In this research, the importance of entrepreneurship in a modern, constantly changing environment is outlined, and the various ways in which entrepreneurship programs can be categorized is also considered. So we're considering one, the importance of entrepreneurship as it is articulated in research, as it plays itself out in developing countries, as it played itself out in some countries such as Malaysia, and I used Malaysia because they have a very strong entrepreneurial culture that they have driven. If you look at where Malaysia was in the past 5 to 10 years, and you look at them where they are and where the future is going for them, you could actually see where the future is pointing for them. You could see that entrepreneurship is really very much anchored as a way of life. Attention in the research is also given to the various difficulties associated with the design of programs that are aimed at supporting SMMEs, as well as their objectives. Their content and the delivery method is reviewed. South Africa has got a lot of institutions or agencies, development funding agencies that have been established in aid of entrepreneurship. You've got the NEF, you've got the IDC, you've got SIFA, Small Enterprise Development Funding. NEF is the National Empowerment Fund, IDC, Industrial Development Corporates. You've got SEDA, Small Enterprise Development Agency. All of these at national level, at provincial level, at municipality level, are given a mandate to go and assist entrepreneurs, as it were. Part of the research focuses on the difficulties that are associated with the program evaluation and the various approaches that are adopted to determine and measure the effectiveness of the programs that we have. And unfortunately, I think that the way that we have done things around supporting entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship in South Africa has left a lot to be desired. One, because I think we do not appear to be deliberate in how we support entrepreneurs. So we throw money at the problem, and money is not always the solution to a problem. You will see when we did the evaluation that money actually, or funding actually, did not come as the top reason why entrepreneurs are not succeeding or why small businesses are failing in the country. So to give you an overview, and this is a very simplified overview, but if I were to give you the detail to this, it would take volumes and volumes and more than 30 minutes for me to present this. To give you an overview and a sense of what the findings are, these are the key elements that make up of the entrepreneurship landscape in South Africa. So when you look at where the entrepreneur starts, they either, in the name of entrepreneurship, maybe I should use that as a term, in the name of entrepreneurship, they either go the BEE route, which is going up, and they end up with a business ownership through a share scheme of sort in a new or an existing business. Allow me to just go through the areas without pointing. I hope that you could follow me if that's okay with you. The alternative to this, what we've created now, is a triple BEE. Triple BEE, in a sense, is now saying, let's unpack the procurement value chain and unearth and identify opportunities in the procurement space for entrepreneurs to play in. Now, in the middle, you will see what are the key entrepreneurship successful determinants, which we know from the Global Economic Forum, which we know are also measured by GEM, which is the entrepreneurship measure that dictates or that tells us where we at or where a country is at from an entrepreneurship participation, entrepreneurship activity, as it were. Some of the elements that are pointed out there include entrepreneurial personality. So a question that we're asking there is whether you are born an entrepreneur or can be taught as to be an entrepreneur. That's the second point. Entrepreneurial education. When is the right time to teach entrepreneurship? The third part is the political will and a political climate that is conducive for entrepreneurship to thrive. Do we have that? Is the question that we asked of South Africa. The fourth part is the funding and funding requirements. Are these adequate? Are these structured? Are these pointed in the right direction in terms of developing and sustaining entrepreneurs? The fifth one is research and development. I don't think that we've invested enough in entrepreneurship, research and development as a country. And a lot still needs to be done in encouraging people to invest in research and development, because it is through research and development that innovation would be sparked, that through that we can find commercially viable entities and so forth. And of course, I mean, from a tips perspective, technology, the use of technology, the use of and driving of innovation, and the use of people. The 5IR dance that Mala was referring to comes to play here. The way that we're doing things has changed so drastically because of the pandemic. I doubt if we're ever going to go back to what we knew as normal. This is the new normal, and how we actually are using technology to drive innovation and using people to actually capture that innovation, as it were. Now, when you look at business ownership through shareholding in a new or existing business, this model through BEE is not sustainable. And here's why. Start thinking about it this way. If you've got 10 companies for which you now issue a prescript that they must be 25% plus one owned by a black company and so forth, whatever the prescripts are, whatever the scorecard is, you have not grown the cake of 25 companies. You still have 25 companies. What happens by the time that all 25 companies are now BEE compliant? The reason why this is not sustainable is because it doesn't lead to the creation of new industries. It doesn't lead to the creation of new businesses through which we will create employment. So that's where we're at with regards to the BEE one. Triple BEE, unlocking the value chain of procurement to identify opportunities, is plausible. And it's also not sustainable, because it only leads to enterprise development and supplier development, which turn out to be company dependent. So this again is not the creation of new material. It's not the creation of new businesses. It's not the creation of new ideas. It is plugging into what exists. What we need, as we seek to show in this research, is a new way of thinking that will drive innovation, that will drive the creation of new commercially viable entities that are sustainable, that are scalable, that will create the employment. That, once you look at that in its holistic sense, will drive to entrepreneurial success. The difficulty that we have right now is that we are stuck with BEE and triple BEE that have served the purpose of transforming, or at least introducing new players in the industries, in various industries, but that has not created new businesses, which is what we desperately need now. So what stands out in the current government support programs? One, the funding. However, having said that, the funding is random, so it's not structured. It does not require of one to meet certain criteria other than of the funder itself. So if I am going to go and look for funding at IDC, as an example, I need a credible business plan, a fundable business plan. But if IDC would say, let us help you, let us co-create, use the word Da Vinci loves so much, let us co-create a business plan on the idea that we know is commercially viable, that is going to be fundable. So they become partners in the creation of an entity that is fundable. Because once you become a partner in that, you will not decline the application for funding when somebody has landed a funding opportunity with you. Secondly, it's the incubation. We are very strong on incubation. DTIC has come up with a program of saying we will fund to the tune of 10 million per annum any incubators that will assist us in driving the creation or the launching of new businesses. However, that program is scant when it comes to detail, because not enough has been invested in making sure that the people or the companies that are incubated are worth incubating, and they are aligned to a bigger strategy or the national development plan. That is not happening. So anybody who has an incubation space can create 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 hot desks and say people must come and do their businesses in those premises. However, there are no details that guide the development step by step. The reason why I keep emphasizing the importance of having a step-by-step, almost a hand-holding approach to entrepreneurship is that, truth be told, 80% of this country, if not more, is not born knowing what entrepreneurship is and what it means to be an entrepreneur. We only fall back into entrepreneurship if we can't get a job, and that is not how we're supposed to be breeding our entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurship must be presented as a career option. If I want to go and do engineering, I should pursue that. But if I also want to go into the entrepreneurial space, I need to be given the comfort that there is support and support programs that would ensure that I actually do my best, or I'm at my best when it comes to what I'm trying to pursue as an entrepreneur. The training is the third element, which is inadequate, and it is not time-years. Research through this paper indicates that education of entrepreneurs need to start much earlier at school level. We do not wait for people to have a set way of thinking, a set way of doing things, and then want to undo that and get them to be entrepreneurs. What do I mean by that? So set ways in that our schooling system, our education system is geared to breeding employment seekers. They're seeking for jobs, so it's job seekers. That is why when they come out of school, even after university, which is supposed to have given us all the necessary skills to be thinking as independent individuals, we still want to go and work for the best company to work for, instead of creating the best company to work for. So the training and the timing of the training is very important. In Malaysia, as an example, the conversation, it appears from the research papers that we've looked at, the conversation is almost started at a family level, early enough. And the conversation goes as such. You need to go to the best school so you can get the best education, and then you can create the best company to work for, as opposed to a South African conversation, which likely goes, go to the best school to go and get the best education so you can go and work for the best company to work for. When you are breeding entrepreneurs, the conversation seems to be very different to when you are breeding job seekers. And so that is what is coming out of the research. And very interestingly, I mean, a lot of data to support that kind of thinking. What is missing in the current government support programs from the research? It shows that it inspired innovation. We are not innovative enough, and it would be a gross misjustice to say that we are not playing in that space. We have a Department of Science and Innovation that is making waves in that space, but more should be done and more can be done. I don't think that the programs that we have are emphatic in terms of market linkages. So entrepreneurs that come out of an incubation program, for example, that may need market linkages, we do not give those, we're not adequate in that. Entrepreneurship education, I've spoken to this point. Pre-business education happens in business and post-launch business. This is what is currently missing and at an entrepreneurship education perspective. And then again, political will. It's the will of the policymakers, the politicians, government, if you will, and the bureaucracy that doesn't seem to be supportive of an entrepreneurship environment. You hear the president talk and say, South Africa is 4IR ready. We're already talking 5IR, as Vinci, but the president would go out and say we are 4IR ready. Research shows that we actually are not 4IR ready. And because if we were, we would not be talking about the kind of and the level of unemployment that we're talking about. So there is that disconnect between what the politicians are saying and what is a reality. The use of technology is limited, and we are finding ourselves wanting because we are now forced. It's not a choice. We're forced to actually go and use technology for work purposes, for personal purposes, for education purposes, for all sorts of purposes. So technology is not going anywhere. And for as long as we actually are not embracing it the way that we're supposed to, we will fail to use technology to drive innovation that will drive the development and the creation of new businesses, as it were. So I thought, let me just give you a sense of where the research is at and what are the next steps for the research, and how things are unfolding in other developing countries. You would find that in other developing countries, the support to SMMEs starts with education and training. Then comes, and this is the chronological flow of that support. It's education and training. It's the use of technology and driving ideation that's supposed to drive ideation. Providing of proof of concept test sites. So if there's a concept that an entrepreneur has, before they go into an incubation, they are provided a site where they could prove, they can test the concept for viability and all of that. And then after that comes the incubation of commercially viable ideas, which is different to what we're doing. The comparison is that in South Africa, we still find that we actually are incubating even commercially not so viable ideas. Then after that comes the funding of a commercially viable business that is scalable. After that is a deliberate evaluation of the progress of a funded business with interventions to rescue where the need arises, if there's a need that arises. This just indicates how serious and how much effort and resources these other developing countries, Malaysia, we looked at Brazil, we looked at Russia, we looked at developed countries like your Italy, we looked at the USA, and we noticed, and it comes out, that there is a deliberate effort to support the development of SMEs in a sustainable way. And also what they've done is they've lowered the barriers and created incentives that make entrepreneurship a career option, as I mentioned. So instead of thinking in a risky way, again, research has pointed that South Africa, there's an interesting paper that suggests that in South Africa, you have to be not so risk averse for you to go into entrepreneurship, purely because it is punitive. So we do not encourage entrepreneurs to fail. What we do is that we attach an entrepreneur's all his belongings or her belongings if they fail to run the business the way that they said they would, and in essence be able to pay back the loan or the funding that we would have given to them. So these are things that we looked at, and it's rich in these topics that I lifted up of the research paper itself to just come and talk to you about and entice you and indicate to you what are the comings and goings of that entrepreneurial space. The next step is to develop a framework to inform policymakers and implementers, officials of policy on the best operating practice to support SMMEs. And this, I know that the Department of Small Business, the ministry, is eagerly awaiting this so that they are also directed, and which is a good thing for Da Vinci. It would be a product of Da Vinci has developed a framework that would actually drive and inform policy on an aspect that is as important as entrepreneurship is and small business development. Secondly, we need to align that to a national development plan and the implementation strategy to make sure that it's not just a policy or it's not just a framework that's going to gather dust. It is in support of the national development plan. The aspect of entrepreneurship in that national development plan needs to be guided by this framework that we are developing through this research. I trust this has given you some insight. I know it's very superficial, but for the time that I've been given and the detail that the research has gone into, I hope it gives you a sense. Thank you, Marla.
Thanks so much, Ezra. I would like to open the floor for any questions to Ezra.
Thank you so much, Dade, for presenting your study. I think it is clear what you aim to achieve. As you went through your presentation, a couple of things just began to reflect in my mind. And one of them is your study a comparative study or not? The reason why I'm asking that, it sounds to me it's like it's a comparative study. And if it is a comparative study, I think it will give you even more richer information in terms of the things that you are looking at, in terms of the incubation, the funding, and the education in entrepreneurship. How other countries, or a particular country or 2 or 3 countries that you choose to compare South Africa with, but also bearing in mind the socio-economic and political differences of these countries. Because I hear you are talking about Russia, we're talking about Brazil and others, Malaysia, for instance. Because what to me will define your study and it will be this socio-economic and political climate within which the SMEs have got to develop, and they've got to be supported one or another. So I would like to hear from you whether you want to make this study a comparative study or not, and if you intend to do that, those will be the areas, again, that you'll have to look at them. But if you are not making it a comparative study, again, you look at South Africa as a case, for instance. It will be interesting because this support, government support that we are talking about, it could differ as per provinces. For example, some provinces might be doing well in supporting the SMEs, and some would not be doing well, for instance. And there's another interesting comparison that comes in there. How would Western Cape, for instance, how is it performing in this regard in relation to other provinces like Free State, for instance? So it will be very different. So another thing, at what level, what layer are you doing your study? Are you doing it at the national level? You doing it at the provincial level? Those categories. I think it's very important also to look into that, because those categories, they can give you different answers to what you are looking at. Thank you so much.
Can I just say what a great presentation this has been, and great quality of ideas which really need to be shouted from the rooftops, because this is what South Africa needs. Ezra, congratulations on an absolutely great study. I think I'm really quite inspired by it. And as an economist, I mean, what you identified is that the real way, in fact, the only way to get growth, as Joseph Schumpeter told us, is through innovation. And you focused on the need to get innovation You've looked at the present strategy that we have, which has been great for transformation, but in effect what has happened, it's focused on procurement and has had the effect of increasing supply chains and introducing inefficiencies rather than improving efficiencies, and that's a very, very valid point. You also made the observation that that finance is not the main reason for failure of businesses. Now, there was an interesting study done in the United States which gave the corollary of that, which is that finance is not the main reason for the success of businesses. In fact, there's a venture capitalist who did a study on over 100 startups in America and identified what were the success factors which led to them thriving as startups. And the finance was in fact the fifth most important. There were the other four factors. I can list them if you're interested, but it correlates with your point that finance is not the main reason. It's the quality of the idea and the associated factors which are the main reasons, which we can go into. So I just want to say what a great presentation, and we just really need to give more exposure to the findings that you're coming up with.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate that.
Thank you. It's Shirley Lloyd. Thank you. I echo Brian's comments and enthusiasm. I think it is a very good presentation and very succinct, to the point, and most inspiring. And we look forward to seeing the final product, which I'm sure will be even better. It reminds me, though, I come out of an education space, and entrepreneurship in the education space has been a hot topic for a number of years, and certainly already in the curriculums of schools, etc., etc. But it reminds me of a person I met very long ago, and he's long ago retired, but it was a British gentleman with a very interesting name, a Mr. Digby Jones. And he was the Minister of Business, or whatever they called it in the UK, and he had a very deep interest in the TVET college system. And so he came out to South Africa, and one of the key messages that he spoke when he was here to the TVET colleges was that they were the ideal vehicles and places where real entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial skills could be developed and born. So for me, it was a very interesting comment there, and you could even look, if you have the time and if it falls within the framework of your study, at the role of different institutional types, because you mentioned education, in the development and training of the entrepreneurs. And an interesting thing would be to look then at the role of the providers of education and training. And I think I remember when the SETAs were busy with their national skills development strategies, 1, particularly 2 and 3, and now in the National Skills Development Plan, that there were very lofty calls for this growth of entrepreneurs and skills related to them, and entrepreneurial training happened. The problem was we didn't have enough qualifications that were really good enough to develop that, and people simply did not understand how you actually go about training entrepreneurs or helping them develop their skills. So that is a very clear point that you have made. I'd like to think that part of the barriers would be definitely the red tape. There are so many bodies, organizations, government departments, policies, acts, pieces of legislation, and a little poor entrepreneur has to navigate their way through that. And you have mentioned that. Is there a political will to make this grow? Who does what with whom? I was just thinking that you have SEDA, which is that small enterprise development agency. Obviously, you've got the key departments. You've got SETAs. Every SETA, there are 21 of them, has a goal and a target around entrepreneurship. You've got the National Skills Development Plan. You've got the NDP, which you mentioned. So Somewhere maybe we need a simpler framework of the policies to enable the emerging entrepreneur or the small business and the young business person not to be confronted with such huge issues. You mentioned very clearly the timing of the training, when does it happen? And again, I fully support that we train people in schools, or not train, we educate in inverted commas, people in schools towards matric, towards the best number of pass rate you can get and distinction, so that you can go to university, so that you can go and get a job. And maybe that's also one of those things where we have to shift the paradigm. I believe things like simulators can be used, simulation can be used much more effectively in the training of entrepreneurs, and paradigm in school subjects that are seen as less than academic, and I think that could be looked at. And then your grounded theory. There are now 3 approaches to grounded theory. So my particular preference is the Shamar's approach, but there are others. So just to mention that. And then there's a very good series of publications you might want to look at from the OECD.
Yes.
And there's one report, a 2015 report, but I'm sure they would have updated it, which speaks about new approaches to SME and entrepreneurship financing, and then broadening the instruments to this. So those are just some thoughts and maybe a couple of ideas that you could weave in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lloyd.
I was actually thinking at some point, Dr. Lloyd, you and Ezra should actually do a Curiosita on this, actually, because it's a very interesting topic indeed.
Okay, so Kali had a question, whether it is a comparative study or not. And he's highlighted quite a number of things that were rather aspects of a comparative study. And I appreciate that feedback, Kali, because it actually lended itself into a comparative study. Initially, what I wanted to do was to pose this question to the Gauteng province's approach using government's support programs and limited to Gauteng. However, we've then taken the route that let's go and see what other provinces are doing in the economic development space that is going to assist us and enrich this research. Like I said when I started, certainly I think there's a lot of information that's on in the research. I couldn't pick what to present and what not to present, and I'm happy that it gave you a sense as to how we are approaching the research itself. And yes, I have looked at BRICS because BRICS is comparative to South Africa in terms of the socio-economic development landscape, and in terms of the political, to some extent, to a very large extent, to the political climate of South Africa. So I'm using that as a comparison. So comparison is national, provincial, and outside of South Africa. So because the study has now lended itself to a qualitative approach as opposed to a mixed method approach, which it had started as. We thought that maybe a mixed method is going to give us a richer understanding and analysis, but there's so much information and no study of this nature around the programs of government that are aimed at supporting SMMEs has ever been done. So I appreciate your input, Kali, and thank you for that.
Thank you so much. I understand. It's clear now.
Dr. Shirley, I would really love the engagement with you, actually for both you and Brian and myself to get together, because I want to sponge off that enthusiasm and that excitement about this. We think we seem to be on the same level in terms of the excitement about this particular subject, and therefore I really would love to pursue that engagement with the both of you, if you allow.
It would be a privilege. Thank you.
Absolutely, I agree. In fact, I think we are behooved to do it. I think your work is so important that it would be irresponsible for us not to work together on getting something going, to try and publicize your findings and make sure then that they're implemented, more important than just publicizing them. Implementation, as with any innovation, is always the problem.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thanks, Mala.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Ezra. I think it's not an easy thing to try to present research in such a short period of time. And I think that you did exceptionally well, and you really do have an exceptional topic. So best of luck forward, and I look forward to the co-creation between yourself, Brian, and Shirley as well. So thank you so much, Ezra.